Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Conscious Life Expo post-conference. I love this expo because we bring in some of the top talent around. And the gentleman that I'm going to introduce is one of the people that is definitely tops in his field and has such incredible information to share. So I would like you to join me in giving a rousing Conscious Life Expo welcome to David Wilcox.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. You know, 2012 is about a new birth, and now that I have my own umbilical cord, we have a great symbolic reference for that. So this is going to be a bridge where we're going to start with the 2012 Enigma material that I didn't get to finish yesterday because literally we had the line for that room wrapped around 2 halls in this hotel. It was enormous. How we got all those people into that room, for those of you who remember, I don't know how it worked, but it was a divine miracle in and of itself that we actually got the people in. So, this is about what the government is like for most people right now. We have gotten into this illusion that the government is our benevolent father figure and protector, and more recently now it's feeling as if, what's the surprise is not what we're expecting. So many people are awakening to cosmic consciousness and higher concepts of metaphysics and spirituality. And this is going to be a true master class in what's really going on. So 3 years ago, I was at this conference, and I met Billy Blake, who should be here, but he's not here yet. He's going to be running around with a handheld camera. And we decided to do a film together. The film is called Convergence, as many of you, or probably all of you, know. So that film deals with the idea that the underlying fabric of this universe is consciousness, which is what all the old mystics and all the old religious traditions have been saying for thousands of years. Now, what I offer is a much more elaborate and intricate spin on the notion of a consciousness field than you've probably ever seen anywhere else. Of course, it goes without saying that for those of you who haven't seen this, when they haven't seen it before, there's a gasp in the audience, but you all are well initiated. Edgar Cayce and myself, there's obviously a facial similarity there. This is my brother and Casey's first guy, Dr. Ketchum, who got him out there in the world. My father, after a Metallica concert, that's why he's sneering. And the Squire, Edgar Cayce's father. My father would only shop at the Squire shop, and everybody called Cayce's father the Squire. This is my best friend Jude and Edwin Blumenthal from the Cayce tradition, one of his principal investors. Jude and I did marvelous music together in high school, at least we thought so at the time. And this is my friend from college, Christopher, and his corresponding reincarnation, Morton Blumenthal. This is my good friend from college, Angelica, and this is Edgar's wife, Gertrude. These are like the only people I'm still in contact with from high school and college. I mean, you have to understand, these are not just random people from my life. These are like some of my closest associates and friends. And then when you find out that they're the same people as in Edgar's circle, it's very, very surprising. Okay, so as we went through yesterday, are there great secrets being held? This was something a lot of people didn't catch on the way they did the reflection on the poster for the Da Vinci Code. And of course, what is the eye and the triangle on top of the pyramid? Is there a message is being given that we're not fully getting access to? Gore's inconvenient truth, sure, that looks like smoke, not. That looks like a galaxy. And here's the Milky Way from the top down. There's our sun, so you can see this is about where we are. So we're not all the way out at the edge, we're kind of in the middle. But doesn't this look sort of like crosshairs to sort of point towards the galactic center and suggest that there's some sort of galactic alignment that's going on here? So later in this talk, you're going to hear about interplanetary climate change, which is how this movement into a new area of energy in our galaxy is in fact actually causing all the planets in the solar system to experience changes just like the ones we see on Earth. So this is far from an isolated phenomenon. There's also these new physics discoveries that keep leaking out, and they always relate to sacred geometry. The idea in this case of the dodecahedron, which is 12 pentagonal faces that kind of looks like a soccer ball if you make it into a sphere. They actually found out, these scientists discovered that the background radiation from when the universe was first created has arranged itself into this odd geometric pattern. And that's been proven. So then the question is, okay, what is the force that would cause that type of geometry to emerge in the formation of the universe? As we're going into the 2012 subject, of course, crop circles have been on everybody's mind. This was the formation that came down a couple years ago, which started out in an unfinished way. You notice that all of these blocks are completely solid, and this area is solid as well. Well, the circle makers, whoever they are, came back. And when they came back, this is what we got. Now you have time markings and symbols from the Mayan calendar, okay? And the alignment of these winged discs in terms of what markers they're pointing to, which corresponds to the Mayan system and the Aztec system, gave you an exact time reference of the length of time between when this was created and 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. So this is a self-referential 2012 diagram given to us by whoever is behind the circle phenomenon. This is one of many crop circles which seems to suggest that the secret to understanding 2012 and this mystery that we're dealing with right here in our talk today is in vibration. That looks an awful lot like a vibrating puddle of liquid. This is what happens when you take vibration to the next step. You get sacred geometry, and I'm going to show you more about that in a second. If you can imagine, this is a sphere and a cube and then another sphere. This is the Froxfield chromosome formation. Obviously, the circle makers are saying, 2012, pay attention to your DNA, right? Except here's the thing. The chromosome's all broken up. And that's what happens before there's about to be a cell metamorphosis. Now, this is even more interesting. Check this out. What does that look like to you? A double helix. Okay, and there's 12 stations. Then down here, you get an even weirder thing. You get a triple helix, but they still have that same formation, and then boom, what's this? And look at the timelines. This is less than a month apart in 1999, and this came out in 96. So it appears that there is a message being given about the basic nature of DNA changing somehow. This is another crop formation which shows you DNA very, very clearly, as you can see that it's twisting, and you can see the ladder and the helixes. So there's something very interesting going on here. Now, this is one of the most staggering formations that's ever come down. And as I said yesterday, the idea that two drunken Englishmen stomped it down with a funny hat and a string and board after coming back from the bar one night, it just doesn't fly. This is much too complex to be something that could have been done without an elaborate. And the thing is, there have been some cases where formations like this have been documented as showing up within a 1 hour period. Like somebody's out there at night, they see nothing, and then there's lights and the dogs start barking and everything goes nuts, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it is. So this is showing you the geometry of the tetrahedron, which here's a drawing of it. This is the frozen vibration that is one of the principal energy fields that moves through planets, as you can see in this diagram. It shows up at 19.5, which is Richard Hoagland's thing. He's speaking tonight at 7. So here's your animation of the actual Great Red Spot, which is at the limb of the tetrahedron down here, and Jupiter. And this also extends through the Great Dark Spot on Neptune. This extends through a shield volcano on Mars called Olympus Mons, all throughout the solar system. So here's the secret. This is just a puddle of water that's got ordinary particles of sand in it called colloids. And those colloids are then vibrated on perfect sound frequencies like the white keys on the piano. And what you get is this interesting geometric shape inside, which should look pretty familiar to us by now. So this is the same pile of sand in the same water, just with different sound frequencies. And this is a very important point we're going to get into soon. The fact is that you can crank up the sound to a different frequency, and you get the same stable geometry. It stays there. It doesn't move. And when you crank it back down, it goes back to the other shape. So these shapes remain consistent for the given volume of water that you have and the shape of that water, regardless of how many times you change your frequencies. And it's also important to notice that the density of the structure, the density of the geometry gets higher as the pitch goes higher. These are increasing pitches as you go down. So that's a very important point. So what if physical matter was actually built like this? What if this is the secret of physical matter? Could that mean that atoms and molecules as we know them could fundamentally shift? That's what we're looking at. As I was training you into seeing yesterday, is there a parallel reality where space and time flip over, where they invert with each other? And the answer is yes. That's actually what is going on. Does this solve all the basic quantum physics problems? It does. And that's been proven. Goes back to the two-slit experiment where you have single electrons that move through two slits, but then they form an interference pattern of more than two slits on the other side, which is like a wave. So here you have a particle, but over here you have a wave, and you can even have multiple strikes at the same time. So atoms and electrons are not little bitty chunks of matter. They're just energy. But they're not behaving the way they should. So here's another diagram of that. This is what a wave does. A wave is just like if there was a liquid here, and then it hits this, it ripples like two waves on a pond coming together, and that's how you get your interference pattern. So, of course, wave-particle duality. What we're discussing now is the idea that a particle is here in space-time. That's where it's fixed in time but can move around in space. But in the inverted world, it's spread out in time. So it's still the same thing. It's just that it's now flipped over into another domain. And in that other domain, it spaces out in time, and thus you get this kind of waveform that's created from it. Well, this would all be just kind of an interesting intellectual study until you start looking at larger objects. Now check this out. This is a little thing called a buckyball or a fullerene. It's carbon molecules, 60 of them put together. Obviously, this is a solid piece of matter. In fact, they're used to store items inside of them. They can be used for like disaster cleanups, like oil spills eventually. If they could manufacture enough of them, that kind of thing would be great for that. Well, Zellinger in 1999 took these carbon-60 molecules and shot them at a 100 nanometer diffraction grating, which is a little slit like we showed you before, and he got an interference pattern, which is like a wave. So do you realize what that means? The buckyballs were rolling inside out somehow. They hit that wall, and they turned over. Like, have you ever had one of those little balloons where you squeeze it in your hand and it goes whoosh? Is everybody with me? That's what seems to be happening with physical matter, and I've heard that from black ops people as well. This is performed in Austria. So this little guy popped into all these waves when he hit the wall because he flipped inside out. Now, what's really interesting about the geometry that we're already showing you, like the geometry at the formation of the universe, is that they also can do this. But they do this in a very interesting way. When these geometries flip inside out, this is the opposite that they form. So when you have the dodecahedron, it forms the icosahedron. The tetrahedron flips into another tetrahedron upside down, and then the octahedron flips over into a cube, and it goes back and forth between those two. Now here's what's another very fascinating point. We've just seen how the fullerene can burst into a wave. Well, guess what? DNA is almost the same width. Now just chew on that for a second if you haven't already seen this talk. I mean, DNA is supposed to be a molecule. In fact, the amount of DNA in one cell of your body, if you spaced it out, is 5 feet long. It's 5 feet tall. So there's a lot of DNA in there. But if DNA can turn into a wave, then that opens the door to all these quantum non-locality principles. All of a sudden that stuff becomes real. It becomes true. Well, we already have plenty of experimental evidence, and I'm just going to show you one of them right for now. This is Kuznachiev, a Russian scientist who passed a diseased cell culture through a shield here, which when it was glass, there was no effect. Of course, the other culture was just healthy tissue. But then when he passed through quartz, the quartz allowed the disease to be transmitted to the healthy